Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about the iPhone 12 mini and see how it holds up in 2021. Now I have yet to do a full review of this thing in this year, mostly because, it's just still a pretty new iPhone and obviously I would recommend people to purchase it. But here's the thing, okay, this specific iPhone is at a weird crossroads in its life cycle, mostly because it really wasn't as popular as Apple or even as I was expecting. I was expecting this thing to be way more popular. A lot of people seem to be giving a lot of attention to these smaller iPhones, and it just seemed like it kind of flopped for a lot of people, even though it still sold, I think, millions and millions of devices. Based on Apple's projections, it just didn't do as good as it normally would have. So I think that's a pretty big thing. I mean, it's kind of sad to be honest, but at the end of it, it is what it is. There's nothing we can really do about it. So having an iPhone like this, you're kind of guaranteed updates, you're guaranteed a very good performing phone, but do keep in mind that the phone community seems like it's smaller for this device than even like an iPhone 12, considering the iPhone 12, the actual, bigger version, is a much better selling phone. It's almost like I think one of the best selling iPhones ever. So that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind. Now on the front of the iPhone 12 mini has that 5.4 inch Super Retina XDR OLED display, and it's a very good panel, full HD 1080p, and for that smaller size it was pretty good. I think something like an iPhone 11 seemed like it was a little bit better, even though that was an IPS panel, but this is still a very good panel for sure. The notch up top with Face ID, and I think it performed very well. There was very few things to complain about in my opinion. I do have that lightning port on the bottom, which I really do like. I hope they don't take it away. And on the back you have that glass back, dual camera setup, MagSafe capability on the back, and no frosted glass back, no nothing like that. And it still feels good, still feels premium. I don't really have too many complaints about it, but I do prefer something like the frosted glass back. That is a much better feeling device in my opinion. So things like the 12 Pro, the 11 Pro, those are really good feeling devices and I really do miss that. So hopefully Apple puts that on all their devices. They probably won't, but that pretty much covers it up on the outside. But we do have to hit on the cameras. So this thing has that dual camera setup on the back, a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor. And overall, this is a very good camera. This is one of the best cameras out there, and you can do 4K at 60. Nothing has really changed on the camera, even with iOS 15. All the camera features are pretty much the same, so we haven't really seen anything super crazy there. But what I will tell you though is that there are small little things within this camera that make it an amazing camera. It's just so stable. You know what you're getting into. The UI is very stable too. I haven't really had too many issues with it. So that's something I really do like. I know what the type of capability my phone is going to give me before I even open the app. Like I know how the phone is going to perform in specific lighting conditions. So I think that's a big thing in and of itself. Now we do have that front facing camera, 12 megapixel sensor there, 4K at 60 on that camera lens as well. And like I mentioned, I think that's a very good thing about this phone. Having that type of capability where it's just very stable, very few things wrong with it, that is something I always look forward to. And it is one of those things that I do think is one of the biggest highlights of the iPhone 12 mini without a doubt. So in terms of that covers it up in the camera standpoint. Now, like I mentioned, the software standpoint is one of the best things about this phone. It is that smaller device. It is getting iOS 15, 16, 17, 18. It's going to be lasting for a very long time. And theoretically, it probably will last as long as something like an iPhone 13 as far as I can tell. So this phone is not even getting started with its software updates. Like this thing is going to be lasting for a long amount of time. And like I stated, when you get a phone like this, you want it to last forever. You want it to last as long as possible. And that does seem like that's going to be the case with this specific device. It doesn't seem like tomorrow it's going to be outdated. And like I mentioned, that is one of the best things about getting an iPhone. You're going to be getting a long supported phone. And that does seem like that's going to be the case with this specific device. Now, unfortunately, one of the worst things about this phone was probably the battery life. You guys probably already guessed it. It had a 2,227 mAh battery, and even still, a lot of people complain about the battery life on this phone, and rightfully so. It just isn't that great of a battery life, and that is something that I'm always saddened by. I feel like Apple could have done a lot better with this battery size. Even though this phone is discontinued or not being produced, it's still being sold, and even though the 13 mini is said to have a bigger battery, that still doesn't increase the size of the battery on this phone. And that is something I just didn't like when Apple did that. I really didn't like that at all, and it's still one of my biggest complaints. I like the size, but the size is a counterpart to the battery size, and the smaller the phone, really the less space you have of putting a bigger battery. So I understand why Apple did it, but I'm not a super huge fan of it. It's probably one of the worst things about this phone, to be honest. So in terms of the battery and in terms of software, we're kind of covering the best and the worst thing about this phone at the same time. Now let's go and sum it up with the performance. Now this thing, like I mentioned, has that Apple A14 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now, like I mentioned before, and I will always continue to say it, having this type of phone with this type of performance, you are almost guaranteed the best performance of that year. It really just comes down to like the Samsung of that year and the iPhone of that year. And this specific case, this iPhone is without a doubt probably one of the best performing iPhones ever. And it's funny because this iPhone is almost the same speed, if not the same exact speed as the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Really, the only difference you're getting from this phone and the 12 Pro Max in terms of performance standpoint is the RAM. You're getting 2 more gigabytes of RAM on the iPhone 12 Pro Max than on this device. But other than that, theoretically, the performance and everything is still going to be about the same. So I think that's a pretty big thing in and of itself. Now, whatever you're going to do with this phone, you're going to have a very good time with. It's going to be a very good performing phone. There's going to be very few things wrong with it. And I do think, like I mentioned, when you get a phone like this, you are guaranteed the performance. So don't let the small package, like the small device, the way it looks, kind of fool you into thinking like, oh, it's not that good of a performing phone, or that it's the cheaper phone, that way it's like slower. It's not technically slower than even the latest iPhones, meaning the 12 Pro Max and the 12 Pro. It's not a slower phone than those. The RAM management is only different. So what I mean by that is like loading apps in the background, you're pretty much going to be getting a better performing device in that standpoint on an iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max than on an iPhone 12 mini. But other than that, it's going to be about the same performance, to be honest. And I've done so many comparisons between the 12 mini and every single other iPhone. And I do get the vibe that the iPhone 12 mini is still a very fast, very good performing phone. So I do think the 12 mini's performance is still very good without a doubt. And that's pretty much how I'd sum that up. Now to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, is the iPhone 12 mini still worth it in 2021? Well, this is pretty much what I'll tell you. I think the iPhone 12 mini is still completely worth it in 2021, obviously, but like I mentioned, I just don't think it's necessarily the best iPhone to pick up. And even for the price, unless you need that small size, if you would just need a small sized iPhone, then I would say go for it. There's very few options out there. But if you have some wiggle room, right? And if you're like, hey, I don't really need to buy the iPhone 12 mini, I can buy an iPhone 12 if I want to, but the iPhone 12 mini is cheaper, I will tell you, you are going to be in such a better position if you just purchase the iPhone 12. That is a much better phone, not only for the size, if you like a smaller size, bigger size, whatever, but the battery size is much bigger on the iPhone 12. It's not even that much bigger, but it's definitely worthwhile to upgrade. Like I mentioned, the 12 mini's battery just isn't that great, and that is the only complaint I have. The 12 is a much better phone in terms of a battery standpoint, so that's where I would kind of sit there. I would tell you, hey, the 12 mini is probably, a really good phone still. It's perfect. It's just the battery. If you're okay with getting a phone that has maybe not the best battery life, then I would say go for it. But the fact that the 12 is just $100 more expensive and it has, a much bigger battery, I would probably recommend picking up that phone over the 12 mini, but you can't really go wrong with either or. The 12 mini is a solid phone, has a very good spec sheet behind it, and I do think it's one of those phones that are pretty much going to last forever. Like I mentioned, there's very few things to complain about this device, so I'd probably recommend picking up the iPhone 12 mini. It's a very good phone, but there's just a few complaints that I have with it. So that's essentially it. If you want to pick up this phone, like I mentioned, links are down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.